I thought I had lost everything that night, but I never knew I was about to meet the one person who would help me find myself again. The rain fell quietly over Chicago, turning the streets into mirrors of silver and gold. Olivia Parker stood beneath the small roof outside a closed neighborhood cafe, holding her 7-year-old son's hand while trying to hide the exhaustion behind her gentle smile. She had learned how to keep moving forward, even when life felt heavier than anyone could see. For years, Olivia had built her world around one simple goal: protecting her son and creating a peaceful life away from the painful memories she left behind. She did not want sympathy. She did not want someone to rescue her. She only wanted a chance to start over. Across the street, a black luxury vehicle slowed near the corner. Inside was Alexander Bennett, one of the most successful CEOs in America. To the world, he was a billionaire who could solve almost any problem with a phone call. His company controlled international investments, his name appeared in business magazines, and people often described him as a man who had everything. But behind the expensive suits and impressive achievements was someone who had forgotten what it felt like to truly connect with another person. That evening, Alexander was returning from another long business meeting. Another room filled with numbers. Another conversation about growth and success. Yet somehow, he felt more empty than ever. Then he noticed Olivia. Not because she looked helpless. Not because she asked for anything. But because she was standing there, tired and cold, still comforting her son with patience and warmth. It was a small moment. A moment most people would have walked past. But Alexander stopped. He stepped out of his vehicle and approached carefully. "Are you both okay?" he asked. Olivia looked surprised. She immediately became cautious, not because she was afraid, but because she had learned that accepting help was complicated. "We are fine," she answered politely. Alexander noticed the answer was honest, but incomplete. She was trying to handle everything alone. He offered assistance, but Olivia gently shook her head. "Thank you, but we can manage." Those words stayed with him. Most people recognized him instantly. Most people wanted something from him. But this woman did not know his name, did not care about his status, and did not ask for anything. She simply wanted to stand on her own. Alexander respected that. Instead of insisting, he offered a simple kindness. He helped arrange a safe ride home through his assistant, and made sure Olivia and her son would not have to continue waiting in the rain. Olivia thanked him quietly, then walked away with her son. Alexander watched them disappear into the city lights. He expected to forget the moment by morning. He had hundreds of meetings, thousands of responsibilities, and an entire company depending on him. But something about that encounter stayed in his mind. For the first time in years, someone had looked at him without seeing his money. Someone had seen only a person. And Alexander Bennett had no idea that the woman walking away into the rain would soon change everything he believed about success, love, and what it truly meant to protect someone. The next morning, Alexander Bennett expected his life to return to the way it had always been. Meetings. Phone calls. Decisions that affected thousands of people. The familiar rhythm of a billionaire CEO who had built an empire through discipline and determination. But something felt different. A small moment from the previous night continued to appear in his thoughts. It was not the rain. It was not the inconvenience of helping a stranger. It was the way Olivia Parker looked at him without knowing who he was. She had not been impressed by his name. She had not changed her attitude because of his success. She had simply been herself. And somehow, that stayed with him. Inside the glass walls of Bennett Global Holdings, Alexander sat through another morning of meetings. His executives discussed investments, future projects, and company growth. Normally, he would have focused only on the numbers. But that day, he found himself thinking about something different. He wondered how many people around him were struggling silently while everyone only saw their professional image. For years, Alexander believed strength meant never needing anyone. He believed successful people solved problems alone. But Olivia had shown him something unexpected. Sometimes strength was not refusing help. Sometimes strength was continuing to care even when life had given you reasons not to. Meanwhile, Olivia Parker woke up in her small apartment on the north side of Chicago. The sunlight came through the window as her son prepared for school. She moved through her morning routine carefully, packing his lunch, checking his backpack, and making sure he started the day with a smile. Her life was not easy, but she had learned to appreciate the quiet moments. A warm breakfast. A small laugh from her son. A peaceful morning without reminders of the past she was trying to leave behind. She did not think about Alexander Bennett. To her, he was simply a kind stranger who offered help on a difficult night. She never imagined that the man she met outside the cafe was someone whose decisions influenced businesses around the world. That afternoon, Alexander found himself asking his assistant a question he rarely asked. "Can you find out if the woman from last night arrived home safely?" His assistant looked surprised. "The woman from the cafe?" Alexander nodded. "Yes. But keep it respectful. I do not want to interrupt her life." It was unusual. Alexander Bennett was known for making quick decisions about major business deals, but this small request felt more personal than anything he had done recently. When his assistant returned with basic information, Alexander learned only a few details. Olivia was a single mother. She worked hard. She lived simply. She had spent years rebuilding her life after difficult circumstances. Nothing about the information suggested someone looking for attention or advantage. Instead, it revealed someone who had quietly survived challenges while continuing to care for others. Alexander looked out of his office window at the city below. For the first time, he wondered about all the people whose stories remained unseen. That evening, Olivia received a small envelope at her apartment. Inside was a note thanking her for reminding someone that kindness still mattered. There was no grand gesture. No request. No expectation. Just a simple message. Olivia smiled as she read it, unaware that the man who sent it was beginning a journey that would change both of their lives. Because sometimes the people who enter our lives for only a moment are the ones who leave the deepest mark. The days after their unexpected meeting passed quietly, but the memory of that rainy evening remained with Alexander Bennett. He had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Business partners wanted opportunities. Investors wanted results. Strangers wanted a connection to his success. But Olivia Parker had wanted nothing. She had simply looked at him like a person. That small difference continued to challenge everything Alexander thought he understood about people. Meanwhile, Olivia returned to her normal routine. Every morning, she woke before sunrise, prepared breakfast for her son, and organized their day with careful attention. She had learned that stability was something she had to create herself. After leaving behind a difficult chapter of her life, she promised herself that her son would grow up knowing peace, kindness, and confidence. She did not talk much about her past. Not because she was hiding something, but because she refused to let yesterday control tomorrow. One afternoon, while working at a small local bakery, Olivia noticed an elderly customer struggling with several bags near the entrance. Without hesitation, she stepped away from her station and helped carry them to the customer's car. It was a simple gesture. Something she did naturally. She did not notice the person watching from across the street. Alexander had arrived nearby for a business meeting and unexpectedly saw Olivia again. He watched as she helped someone without expecting recognition or reward. It reminded him of the first night they met. She was still the same person. Her kindness was not something she displayed when someone important was watching. It was simply part of who she was. After his meeting ended, Alexander walked into the bakery. Olivia looked surprised when she saw him. "You again," she said with a smile. Smile. Alexander smiled back. "I hope that is not a bad thing." Olivia laughed softly. "No. I am just surprised." They talked for a few minutes. Their conversation was simple, but Alexander found himself enjoying it more than the formal discussions he had every day. Olivia asked about his work, but she did not react with excitement when she learned he was the CEO of Bennett Global Holdings. Instead, she asked a question that caught him off guard. Do you enjoy what you do? Alexander paused. It was a question he had not expected. Many people asked about his success, his company, or his achievements. Few people asked if he was happy. I think I used to, he answered honestly. Olivia looked at him carefully. Maybe you are still trying to figure out what matters. Her words were simple, but they stayed with him. Alexander realized she saw something others missed. She saw the person behind the title. Before leaving, Alexander thanked her for the conversation. Olivia smiled and returned to her work. She did not know that a few minutes with her had made a powerful man question the direction of his entire life. That evening, Alexander sat alone in his office long after everyone else had gone home. The city lights reflected against the glass walls around him. He looked at his accomplishments, the things he had built, and the life he had created. For the first time in years, he wondered if success was only about reaching the highest point. Maybe it was also about finding someone who reminded you why the journey mattered. And without realizing it, Olivia Parker had become the first person in a long time who made him want to look beyond himself. Alexander Bennett had faced difficult decisions before. He had negotiated complicated business deals, managed unexpected challenges, and carried the responsibility of thousands of employees. But nothing had prepared him for the quiet questions that began appearing in his own mind after meeting Olivia Parker. He was starting to realize that the hardest problems were not always found in boardrooms. Sometimes they were found in understanding yourself. At Bennett Global Holdings, people began noticing small changes in their CEO. Alexander still arrived early. He still expected excellence. He still made important decisions with confidence. But something about him was different. He listened more carefully. He asked employees about their ideas instead of only reviewing their reports. He noticed the people who worked behind the scenes to keep the company moving. His executives were surprised by the change. For years, Alexander had been known as someone who focused on results above everything else. Now, he seemed interested in something deeper. Meanwhile, Olivia Parker continued building her quiet life. She never expected to see Alexander again after their conversation at the bakery. She considered him a kind stranger who happened to cross her path. She did not know that he often thought about their conversations. She did not know that her simple questions had challenged beliefs he had carried for years. One evening, Olivia received an unexpected phone call. Her former partner had contacted her after a long time, bringing back memories she had worked hard to leave behind. The conversation was not dangerous, but it reminded her of the emotional weight she had carried for years. After hanging up, Olivia sat quietly in her apartment, while her son finished his homework nearby. She looked around the small home she had created and reminded herself of something important. She had already survived the hardest moments. She did not need to return to the person she used to be. The next day, Alexander noticed that Olivia seemed quieter when he met her at the bakery. He did not ask personal questions immediately. He simply offered a conversation. Sometimes people think starting over means forgetting the past, he said. But maybe it means learning that the past does not control you anymore. Olivia looked at him with surprise. She wondered how someone with so much success could understand that feeling. Alexander smiled slightly. I know what it is like to build something new after losing something important. For the first time, Olivia saw that the billionaire in front of her was not just a powerful businessman. He was also someone carrying his own hidden struggles. Their conversation was different from before. It was not about money, success, or problems that needed quick solutions. It was about two people understanding what it meant to rebuild a life. Alexander wanted to help, but he also understood something important. Olivia did not need someone to take control of her story. She needed someone who respected her strength. That realization changed the way he saw protection. It was not about saving someone because they were weak. It was about standing beside someone because they deserved support. As the evening ended, Alexander watched Olivia leave the bakery with her son. He realized he was not drawn to her because she needed him. He was drawn to her because she reminded him of the person he wanted to become. And for the first time in many years, Alexander Bennett felt that maybe the future he was searching for was not something he could build alone. Alexander Bennett had spent his entire life building walls. Not physical walls, but emotional ones. He created distance between himself and the world because distance felt safer. In business, it helped him stay focused. In life, it helped him avoid disappointment. But meeting Olivia Parker had slowly changed the way he looked at those walls. She never tried to break them down. She simply showed him that he did not have to hide behind them forever. In the weeks that followed, Alexander found himself visiting places he had ignored for years. He walked through different departments of his company without a schedule filled with meetings. He spoke with employees who had worked there for a long time, but had rarely spoken directly with him. He listened to their stories, their challenges, and their ideas. For the first time, he understood that every person inside his company had a life beyond their job title. That realization stayed with him. Meanwhile, Olivia Parker continued facing the challenges of rebuilding her own life. She worked hard, cared for her son, and tried to create a future where peace mattered more than the past. But some memories were not easy to leave behind. Her former relationship had affected the way she trusted people. She had learned to depend only on herself because depending on someone else once brought disappointment. When Alexander noticed her hesitation, he did not push her to share more than she wanted. He understood that trust could not be demanded. It had to be earned. One afternoon, Alexander invited Olivia and her son to a small community event organized by Bennett Global Holdings. He explained that the company was supporting local families and creating new opportunities in neighborhoods that needed more resources. Olivia was surprised when she arrived. She expected a formal business event filled with important people. Instead, she saw employees talking with families, children enjoying activities, and people connecting naturally. Alexander watched her reaction and smiled. "This is the kind of work I want the company to be known for," he said. Olivia looked around. "It is nice to see people helping because they care, not because they expect something back." Alexander nodded. "That is something I am still learning." Those words surprised her. She was used to seeing successful people appear confident and certain. But Alexander was honest about his own growth. He was not pretending to have every answer. He was learning. As the day continued, Olivia noticed something different about him. He did not act like someone who wanted praise. He did not need people to know he was responsible for the event. He simply wanted to make a difference. For Alexander, watching Olivia interact with others reminded him why he respected her. She treated everyone with the same kindness, regardless of their position or background. She spoke to employees, families, and strangers with the same warmth. That evening, after the event ended, Alexander walked Olivia and her son to their car. Before leaving, Olivia thanked him. "You have done a lot for people," she said. Alexander smiled gently. "Maybe. But I think I am finally learning why it matters." As Olivia drove away, Alexander stood quietly for a moment. He realized something important. He had spent years believing power meant being able to change the world around him. But Olivia showed him that real influence came from changing the way people felt. And without knowing it, the single mother he wanted to protect was already helping him heal parts of himself he had forgotten existed. Alexander Bennett had spent years believing that protecting something meant controlling every detail around it. In business, that mindset had helped him build one of the most successful companies in the country. Every decision was calculated. Every risk was carefully measured. But when it came to Olivia Parker, he discovered that real protection looked completely different. It was not about taking over someone's life. It was about standing beside them and allowing them to become stronger on their own. As their friendship slowly grew, Alexander became more aware of the small battles Olivia faced every day. Not dramatic battles that the world could see, but quiet challenges that required patience and courage. Balancing work, raising her son, and rebuilding her confidence after a difficult past was not easy. Yet Olivia continued forward without asking anyone to carry her responsibilities. That strength was what impressed Alexander the most. One afternoon, Alexander met Olivia at a small park near her neighborhood. Her son was playing nearby while she watched with a peaceful smile. The scene was simple, but Alexander noticed something he rarely saw in his own world. Genuine happiness. "You seem different here," Alexander said. Olivia looked at him with curiosity. "Different how?" "More relaxed," he answered. "Like you do not have to prove anything." Olivia smiled softly. "Maybe because I do not think happiness comes from proving yourself." Those words stayed with Alexander. In his world, everyone was always trying to achieve more, earn more, and become more impressive. But Olivia reminded him that a meaningful life was not built only on accomplishments. It was built on moments that mattered. As they continued talking, Olivia slowly opened up about her past. She explained that there was a time when she stopped believing she deserved better. She had spent years blaming herself for choices that were never completely hers to carry. Alexander listened carefully. He did not interrupt. He did not offer quick solutions. He simply allowed her to be heard. For Olivia, that meant more than she expected. She had met many people who wanted to tell her what to do, but very few who were willing to truly listen. "I think people forget that healing takes time," Olivia said quietly. Alexander nodded. "I think people forget that everyone has something they are trying to heal from." It was the first time Olivia realized that the billionaire in front of her also carried invisible struggles. Behind the success, the expensive suits, and the confident image was a person who had spent years avoiding vulnerability. That evening, Alexander returned home and looked through old photographs from his younger years. He remembered a time when he believed success would answer every question he had. Now he understood that success without connection could still feel empty. Meanwhile, Olivia sat at home watching her son sleep peacefully. She realized something had changed. She was not depending on Alexander to save her. Instead, she was discovering that there were people who could support her without taking away her independence. Two people from different worlds were slowly learning the same lesson. Everyone needs kindness. Everyone needs understanding. And sometimes the person who helps you find your strength is the person who simply chooses to stand beside you. Alexander Bennett had learned that trust was not built through promises. It was built through consistency, patience, and the small actions people remembered long after words were forgotten. For years, Alexander had been surrounded by people who respected his position, but he rarely knew if they respected the person behind it. With Olivia Parker, everything felt different. She did not treat him like a billionaire CEO. She treated him like Alexander. That simple difference continued to change him. As their connection grew stronger, Alexander became more protective of Olivia's peace. He noticed when she became quiet during conversations. He noticed when she tried to handle every problem alone. But he also understood something important. Olivia did not need someone to take control of her life. She needed someone who believed in her strength. One evening, Alexander invited Olivia and her son to a small dinner at a family restaurant. Away from the attention of the business world. He wanted them to experience a normal evening without expectations or pressure. For once, Alexander was not discussing investments, company plans, or future expansion. He was simply enjoying a conversation. Olivia noticed the difference immediately. "You seem happier when you are not talking about business," she said with a smile. Alexander laughed quietly. "Maybe I am realizing there is more to life than business." Olivia looked at him thoughtfully. "That is something many people spend years trying to understand." Her words reminded him how much he had changed. Meanwhile, the outside world was beginning to notice that Alexander Bennett was different. His company had started supporting more community projects, and employees were talking about his new approach to leadership. But not everyone welcomed the changes. Some people in his professional circle believed Alexander was becoming too emotional. They questioned why he was spending time with someone outside his usual world. They wondered why a billionaire CEO would care so much about a single mother with an ordinary life. Alexander heard the comments, but they no longer affected him the way they once did. In the past, he would have focused on protecting his reputation. Now, he cared more about protecting what was meaningful. When Olivia heard about the attention surrounding Alexander, she became uncomfortable. She worried that her presence was creating problems for him. "Maybe I should step back," she said quietly. Alexander looked at her with understanding. "Why?" he asked. Olivia hesitated. "Because your world is different from mine. I do not want to become a problem in your life." Alexander shook his head. "You are not a problem, Olivia. You reminded me that my life was missing something important." Those words touched her, but she still struggled with accepting support. She had spent so long depending only on herself that allowing someone else to care felt unfamiliar. Alexander understood. He did not try to convince her with grand gestures. Instead, he continued showing up in simple ways. He listened. He respected her choices. He supported her dreams. That night, Olivia realized something she had forgotten. Letting someone stand beside you did not mean you were weak. Sometimes it meant you were finally allowing yourself to be cared for. And Alexander Bennett discovered that protecting someone was not about being their hero. It was about reminding them that they were never alone. Alexander Bennett had spent years believing that people were defined by what they achieved. Their careers. Their wealth. Their reputation. But the more time he spent with Olivia Parker, the more he realized that a person's true character was revealed in moments when there was nothing to gain. Olivia never tried to impress him. She never changed the way she spoke because of his success. She never looked at him as someone who could solve every problem. She simply saw him as a person. And that was something Alexander had not experienced in a very long time. As their friendship continued, Alexander became more aware of the quiet strength Olivia carried every day. He saw how she balanced work, motherhood, and personal challenges without asking the world for sympathy. He saw how she encouraged her son to believe in kindness even though life had not always been kind to her. One afternoon, Alexander visited Olivia's neighborhood. It was different from the places he usually spent time in. There were no luxury buildings, no formal meetings, and no people trying to gain his approval. There were families walking together, neighbors greeting each other, and small businesses where people knew one another by name. Olivia showed him the community she loved. "This is where I learned what matters," she said. Alexander looked around with genuine curiosity. "What do you mean?" Olivia smiled. "People here do not have everything. But they still find ways to help each other." Those words stayed with him. Alexander had spent years surrounded by people with unlimited resources, yet he rarely saw the kind of connection he witnessed in Olivia's neighborhood. Later that week, Alexander made a decision that surprised his executives. He announced a new initiative through Bennett Global Holdings focused on supporting local families, education programs, and community opportunities. Some leaders questioned the decision. They believed the company should focus only on financial growth. Alexander listened carefully before answering. "Growth means nothing if we forget the people who make it possible." His response showed how much he had changed. The man who once measured everything through numbers was now considering the human stories behind those numbers. Meanwhile, Olivia struggled with something unexpected. She began to worry that Alexander's world was too far from hers. She wondered if their connection could survive the difference between their lives. One evening, she shared those concerns with him. "You have a whole world built around you," she said. "I have a small apartment, a regular job, and a lot of responsibilities." Alexander looked at her calmly. "Olivia, I have spent my entire life surrounded by people who wanted what I had. You are the first person who cared about who I was." She looked away, touched by his honesty. For the first time, she started to understand that Alexander was not offering her a different life because he thought hers was not enough. He was offering companionship because he respected the life she had already built. That realization changed everything. Olivia was no longer seeing herself as someone who needed to be rescued. She was seeing herself as someone worthy of being valued. And Alexander was learning that love was not about finding someone to complete you. It was about finding someone who reminds you that you were already whole. Alexander Bennett had spent most of his life believing that control was the key to success. If he could predict the future, prepare for every possibility, and make every decision carefully, then nothing could surprise him. That belief had helped him build a powerful company and become one of the most respected CEOs in the country. But Olivia Parker had shown him something unexpected. Some of the most important moments in life could not be planned. They simply happened. And sometimes, the people who changed your life arrived when you least expected them. As Alexander and Olivia became closer, the difference between their worlds became impossible to ignore. People around Alexander noticed the change in him. He smiled more. He spent less time focused only on business. He began leaving the office earlier to enjoy simple moments that once seemed unimportant. But not everyone understood. Some of his colleagues believed Olivia was distracting him from his responsibilities. They questioned why a billionaire CEO would spend time with someone whose life was so different from his own. Alexander heard those opinions, but he no longer allowed other people to decide what mattered to him. Meanwhile, Olivia faced her own doubts. She appreciated Alexander's kindness, but a small part of her wondered if she truly belonged in his world. She remembered how difficult it had been to rebuild her confidence after her past experiences. The last thing she wanted was to become known only as the woman connected to a wealthy man. She wanted to be valued for who she was. One evening, Olivia shared her feelings with Alexander while they sat in a quiet coffee shop. "I do not want people to think I am here because of your money," she said honestly. Alexander looked at her with understanding. "I know," he replied. "That is one of the reasons I respect you." Olivia looked surprised. "Most people would see my situation and assume I need someone to change my life." Alexander shook his head. "I do not think your life needs to be changed. I think you have already done something incredible by rebuilding it." His words meant more than she expected. For so long, Olivia had focused on proving that she could handle everything alone. She had forgotten what it felt like to have someone recognize her efforts. Not because they felt sorry for her. Because they admired her. At the same time, Alexander was facing a decision inside his own company. A major opportunity required him to choose between the traditional path his advisors preferred and a new direction focused on helping communities. In the past, he would have chosen the option with the clearest financial advantage. But now he thought differently. He remembered Olivia's words about people helping each other even when they had little. He realized success was not only measured by what you gained. It was also measured by what you gave back. When Alexander made his decision, some people were surprised. But he felt more certain than ever. He was no longer trying to prove that he was successful. He was trying to become someone worthy of the life he had built. And as Olivia slowly opened her heart to trust again, she discovered something important. The right person does not make you feel smaller. The right person reminds you of how strong you have always been. Alexander Bennett had learned that changing the way you see the world was not always a sudden moment. Sometimes, it happened through small conversations, quiet decisions, and people who showed you a different way to live. For Alexander, that person was Olivia Parker. She had entered his life without knowing his reputation, his wealth, or the influence behind his name. She only saw a man standing in the rain who needed to remember what kindness felt like. Weeks had passed since their first meeting, and Alexander noticed that his priorities had changed. His company was still successful. His responsibilities were still demanding. But his definition of success was no longer the same. He no longer measured his days only by completed deals or financial achievements. He began measuring them by the moments that made him feel connected to the people around him. Olivia noticed the difference too. She saw that Alexander was not pretending to be a better person. He was genuinely trying to understand others in a way he never had before. One afternoon, they visited a local community center that Bennett Global Holdings had started supporting. Olivia watched Alexander speak with families, listened to their stories, and thanked the volunteers who worked there. She expected to see a powerful businessman giving orders. Instead, she saw someone who cared. "You are different when nobody is watching," Olivia said. Alexander looked at her with curiosity. Is that a compliment? She smiled. Yes. I think it means you are finally becoming comfortable being yourself. Her words stayed with him. Alexander had spent years building an image of confidence. But Olivia saw beyond that image. She saw the person who was still learning, still growing, and still trying to understand what truly mattered. Meanwhile, Olivia faced a difficult emotional decision of her own. A part of her still worried about allowing someone into her life. She had worked so hard to create stability for herself and her son that trusting another person felt unfamiliar. She feared losing the independence she had fought so hard to build. Alexander noticed her hesitation and reminded her of something important. Accepting support does not erase your strength, he told her. It proves you are strong enough to know you do not have to carry everything alone. Olivia thought about those words for a long time. She realized that strength was not always about standing by yourself. Sometimes strength was allowing good people to stand beside you. Around the same time, Alexander faced pressure from some business partners who questioned his new choices. They believed his focus on community projects and personal connections would weaken his leadership. In the past, Alexander might have changed his direction to satisfy them. But he had changed. He understood that leadership was not about making everyone approve of your decisions. It was about making decisions you could respect. He calmly explained that a company's success should not only be seen in numbers, but also in the positive impact it created. That evening, Alexander and Olivia walked through the city streets together. The lights reflected across the sidewalks, and for a moment neither of them thought about their different backgrounds. They were simply two people sharing a quiet moment. Alexander realized he had spent years searching for something he could not buy. Olivia realized she was no longer afraid of letting someone care about her. They were both discovering the same truth. Sometimes the person who helps you move forward is not the person who changes your life. It is the person who reminds you that your life was already valuable all along. Alexander Bennett had always believed that the hardest challenges in life were the ones that appeared on paper. Complex business decisions. Difficult negotiations. Problems with clear solutions waiting to be discovered. But as his connection with Olivia Parker grew deeper, he realized that the most important challenges were often invisible. They existed in moments of doubt, memories from the past, and the quiet fears people carried inside. Olivia had taught him that not every problem needed to be solved. Sometimes, people simply needed someone willing to stay. For Olivia, that lesson was becoming just as important. She had spent years believing that independence meant never needing anyone. She built her routine around protecting her son, managing responsibilities, and keeping her emotions carefully controlled. She had convinced herself that depending on another person was a risk she could not afford. But Alexander was showing her something different. He was not trying to replace her strength. He was reminding her that strength and support could exist together. One Saturday morning, Alexander joined Olivia and her son for a simple community event near their neighborhood. It was not the type of place where he usually spent his time. There were no executives, no luxury settings, and no discussions about billion-dollar decisions. There were families sharing food, children playing games, and neighbors helping one another. Alexander watched Olivia interact with everyone around her. She remembered names. She listened carefully. She made people feel important. He realized that her kindness was not something she showed only when life was easy. It was something she carried through every difficult moment. "How do you keep being this positive?" Alexander asked. Olivia smiled gently. "I do not think life is always positive. I just think someone has to choose kindness, even on the hard days." Alexander looked at her quietly. Those words meant more than she knew. He had spent years surrounded by people who competed for success. Olivia reminded him that the greatest impact often came from simple actions. Later that afternoon, Alexander received a message from his company executives about upcoming decisions. Some leaders were still questioning his new priorities. They believed he was allowing personal feelings to influence his professional judgment. Alexander read the message carefully, but instead of feeling pressured, He felt calm. He knew the difference between losing focus and finding purpose. Olivia had not distracted him from success. She had helped him understand what success was supposed to mean. That evening, Alexander visited Olivia's apartment. The setting was simple compared to his large home, but he felt more comfortable there than he expected. Olivia prepared coffee while her son showed Alexander a school project he had been working on. It was an ordinary moment, yet Alexander realized he valued it more than many expensive experiences he had collected over the years. Before leaving, Alexander paused at the door. "Thank you," he said. Olivia looked confused. "For what?" "For reminding me that life is more than achievements." Olivia smiled softly. "I think you already knew that. You just needed someone to remind you." As Alexander walked back to his car, he thought about how much had changed. He once believed having everything meant never feeling uncertain. Now he understood that uncertainty was part of becoming better. And Olivia discovered something equally important. The person standing beside her was not trying to save her from her past. He was helping her believe that her future could be different. Two people who started from completely different worlds were slowly building something neither of them expected. Not a perfect life. Not a life without challenges. But a life filled with trust, respect, and the kind of connection that could not be bought. Alexander Bennett had finally reached a place in his life where he no longer wanted to hide behind success. For years, he believed that being strong meant carrying every responsibility alone. He believed emotions were distractions and that vulnerability was something powerful people could not afford. But Olivia Parker had changed that belief without ever trying to change him. She never demanded answers. She never expected perfection. She simply showed him that a meaningful life was not built only through achievements, but through the people who made those achievements worth having. As the weeks passed, Alexander and Olivia continued to grow closer. Their relationship was not built on grand promises or dramatic moments. It was built on small things. Honest conversations. Shared laughter. Quiet evenings where they could simply be themselves. For Olivia, those moments were unfamiliar. She had spent so much time protecting herself that she almost forgot what it felt like to trust someone completely. One evening, while sitting on a bench near a quiet lake outside Chicago, Olivia opened up about the fear she still carried from her past. "Sometimes I wonder if I will always be defined by what happened before," she admitted. Alexander looked at her with understanding. "You are not your past, Olivia. You are everything you chose to become after it." His words reached a place in her heart that she had kept protected for years. She realized that Alexander was not looking at her as someone broken. He was looking at her as someone strong. Someone who had survived difficult moments and still chose kindness. Meanwhile, Alexander faced a moment of reflection in his own life. His company was preparing for one of its biggest expansions, and everyone expected him to focus only on financial success. But Alexander wanted to make sure the growth created opportunities for others as well. He remembered something Olivia once said about people helping each other even when they had very little. That idea became the foundation of his next decision. He introduced a new company program focused on supporting families, education, and community development. The announcement received attention across the business world. Some people praised the change, while others questioned whether Alexander was becoming too personally involved. But Alexander was no longer concerned with proving himself to people who only measured success through numbers. He knew who he wanted to become. When Olivia heard about the program, she was touched. She understood that Alexander was not simply giving away resources. He was changing the way he viewed responsibility. "You know," she said, "a lot of people have money. But not everyone uses it to make someone's life better." Alexander smiled. "I learned that from someone who had much less than me but gave much more." Olivia looked down, touched by his words. For so long she believed her life had been a series of things she had lost. But now she was beginning to see what she had gained. Strength. Wisdom. A deeper understanding of herself. And someone who believed in her future. That night, Alexander realized something he never expected. He thought he had entered Olivia's life to protect her from what came before. But the truth was different. Olivia had helped him escape a different kind of past. A past where success mattered more than connection. A past where achievement replaced happiness. Together, they were not creating a perfect story. They were creating a real one. A story built on healing, trust, and the simple truth that sometimes the person who saves your heart is the person who teaches you how to open it again. Alexander Bennett once believed that the greatest achievements in life were the ones everyone could see. The company built from nothing. The millions of decisions that shaped his success. The recognition that came with becoming one of the most respected CEOs in America. But standing in the quiet moments of his life now, Alexander understood something he never expected. The most meaningful changes were often the ones nobody noticed at first. They happened inside the heart. They happened through the people who reminded you who you truly were. Months had passed since the night he met Olivia Parker in the rain. What began as a simple act of kindness had become the most important connection of his life. Olivia was still the same person he first met. She was still hardworking, caring, and determined to create a peaceful future for her son. But something inside her had changed. She no longer looked at herself as someone defined by difficult memories. She saw herself as a woman who had overcome them. Alexander had never tried to rewrite her story. He never asked her to forget what happened before. He simply stood beside her while she created a new chapter. One morning, Alexander visited Olivia and her son at their neighborhood park. It was a place that once seemed completely different from his world. Now, it felt familiar. Children laughed nearby. Families enjoyed the morning together. Neighbors greeted each other warmly. Alexander watched Olivia smile and realized that this simple moment meant more to him than any luxury experience he had ever known. "Do you ever miss the old life?" Olivia asked. Alexander looked around before answering. "The old life gave me everything I thought I wanted. But this life gives me something I never knew I needed." Olivia smiled. She understood what he meant. They had both spent years searching for something they believed was missing. Alexander thought he needed more success. Olivia thought she needed to become completely independent. But they both discovered the same truth. A fulfilling life was not built by having everything. It was built by knowing what truly mattered. Over time, Alexander continued leading Bennett Global Holdings with a different purpose. His company remained successful, but his leadership became known for creating opportunities and supporting people. He no longer wanted his name remembered only because of wealth. He wanted his actions to represent something greater. Olivia continued building her own dreams as well. She started a small community project inspired by the kindness she had always shown others. Alexander supported her, but he never took control. He understood that her strength was one of the reasons he admired her. Together, they created a life based not on what one person could give the other, but on what they could build together. Looking back, Alexander realized he never truly saved Olivia from her past. She had already saved herself through courage, patience, and determination. What he gave her was not a new life. He gave her a reminder that she did not have to walk through life alone. And what Olivia gave him was even more valuable. She showed a man who had everything money could buy that the greatest wealth was found in kindness, connection, and love. Because sometimes the person who enters your life needing support becomes the person who teaches you how to truly live.